Hello everybody, my name is Raven, this is Jasper, this is October, and welcome back to our channel. Subscribe to become part of the Hive. Be sure to like and ring the notification bell. Thanks, honeybees. Enjoy the video. Meow. Thank you. Thank you, that's all I needed. Thank you. Bye-bye. So I'm currently working on a video of the best and worst movies of 2022, and there's a few on my ranked list. I've saw a lot of movies this year. Obviously, I didn't talk about all of them. There are a lot that I talked about, and there's just a couple that I wanted to talk about but haven't. So before that Best of 2022 video comes out, I wanted to just talk about a couple movies that I saw and haven't talked about yet that came out last year. The first one being Bones and All.
But you can't spend the night?
Not all night.
So where'd you move here from anyway?
Eastern Shore. Try that.
Now, I saw Bones and All at AFI Fest, which was recently, just a couple months back, and I reacted to the trailer for it in a video I did, I think in October, and it came out not much later at AFI Fest. And this one I want to talk about because it's so, just for me personally, divisive. Just like in my own brain, half of me thinks it's a good movie and appreciates it for what it is, and the other part of me just like doesn't like it at all, regardless of that fact that I think it's actually a good movie. Hopefully this doesn't turn into like weird rambling about it and super nonsensical. Hopefully I can kind of explain my point throughout this video about why I think that. And I have to say it first because I saw it in a festival. It's kind of a weird situation. If you've ever been to a film festival or seen any movies that got really good reviews at a film festival like Sundance or something like that, most movies get praised no matter what they are, just because they've been in a film festival. We've all seen the stories of like, oh, this movie got a 20-minute standing ovation. Oh my God, it was amazing. And then it comes out in theaters and you're just like, meh, it's just okay. You know, you're kind of in a special mood when you're at a festival where you're just like willing to love everything, and it has to be good if it's playing at a festival, right? But that isn't always true. And I only say that because I believe I was maybe influenced a lot by the people that did like it at AFI Fest. Because when I watched it, kind of as I was watching it and after I watched it, my first reaction was that I didn't really like it. I thought it was okay, but it wasn't what I was expecting, which is part of it as well. I didn't go in it with the right expectations. But talking with some of the people I saw the movie with at the festival, and getting their perspective on it and their opinion, and that they really, really liked it. And I wanted to know, why did you really, really like it? You know, like what's different about how I saw the movie? And getting their perspective actually made me appreciate it more. I then understood that I had these expectations for it that were not accurate to what the movie actually is, and that's why it disappointed me. Kind of similar to when I saw Elvis. I had it in my head that this was going to be like the greatest movie ever, and I was going to love it, and it was just going to be fantastic and flawless. And then when it wasn't, I was super disappointed. But then I watched it again and adjusted my expectations to what the movie's about, and I actually liked it a lot upon second viewing. And Bones and All, I feel like it's kind of like that, because I watched it and I was like, I don't know, I don't like it, maybe I just don't get it, man. And then talking with some people that did like it, I kind of understand where my head was supposed to be while watching it, and that it's not, you know, about just what's on screen. Most movies aren't, but I kind of needed help to kind of see past what was just right in front of me. So Bones and All, if you haven't seen it, I'll just go over what it's about really quickly as best I can. It stars Timothee Chalamet and Taylor Russell, mainly Taylor Russell. It starts with her. She's definitely the main protagonist of the film. Timothee Chalamet comes along a little bit later and is the romantic interest / partner in crime. There's also Mark Rylance, who plays a character named Sully, who she meets first along this journey that she goes on. Basically, Taylor Russell lives with her dad. This is like middle America in like the 70s. And we find out, is a cannibal. And cannibals in this universe don't have to eat humans to survive necessarily. They can eat regular food. It's just kind of like this screaming hunger inside them that tells them that like they have to eat a person, not every day, not even every week. You can go long time without it, but eventually you just have to. You just have to eat a person. And so Taylor, I'm just going to call them by their their real names because it's going to be hard for me to keep track of all the characters' names. But in the movie, her name is Marin, but I'm just going to call her Taylor. Taylor and her dad have been kind of running away from this issue. Every so often, she just has to feed, and it's sometimes like a classmate or a friend or a babysitter. And every time it happens, they have to just pack up and leave immediately to not get caught. And eventually, her dad is kind of tired of doing this and leaves her on her own to just kind of figure it out. So she basically travels around other states in middle America, and on this journey, she runs into Timothee Chalamet, who is just like her. Well, first, she runs into Mark Rylance, who is this like weird older guy who can smell her from a mile away, and she discovers through him that there are other people like her. And he kind of delves some of the secrets and things that she can do as an eater, he calls it. One of the rules he kind of has for himself is that eaters don't eat other eaters, and she can be trained to like smell when a person is about to die so she can feed. And so they go to this house, they feed on this old lady, and it's just like kind of intense, weird, scary scene, but not scary in scary in a like, oh, this is very unsettling, which I kind of liked. I appreciated that feeling, you know. There's a lot of different ways to scare a person than just like gore and jump scare and you know, it's unsettling, which is a special feeling when you watch a movie, and I appreciated that. Anyway, then she finds Timothee Chalamet after she leaves Mark Rylance because he's kind of a weirdo and she doesn't want to travel with him. He makes her uncomfortable. She runs into Timothee Chalamet, who is also an eater. He like eats a guy behind a grocery store, and she finds him. And then they just basically decide to travel together. He, when he eats someone, kind of steals their car and lives in their house for a little while before moving on to basically the next feed. They're kind of just living together. They're living for the next feed and trying to find the next person they can eat. And that's the majority of the movie. And we find out a few things about Timothée Chalamet's family. He had an abusive dad. We find out later he ate his dad, but it's possible his dad was an eater. And we find out that Taylor Russell's mother, who she never met, was also an eater. She is played by Chloe Sevigny, and she is actually still alive and in like a mental institution where she had like gnawed her own hands off. So that was kind of a scary image because we do end up seeing her mother, and then her mother writes her this note that she reads, well, that she had written her a long time ago before she gnawed off her hands. And her mother, as Taylor is reading this note, tries to eat her, to kind of take her out of this world. She explains it in the note as, you know, I don't want you to suffer, so I might as well take you out of this world. But it doesn't work. And Taylor leaves and decides to live a life with Timothée Chalamet. And I thought that's where the movie should end, where they kind of decide to be normal people. There's like this black screen and this dialogue of like, maybe we should go try to be normal people for a while. And they're like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, let's totally just be normal people. But then there's 20 minutes left where they're like living on their own. Timothée Chalamet's talking to his like sister on the phone. Things are good. And then Mark Rylance comes back and tries to kill them, and they end up killing him, but not before Timothée Chalamet gets like stabbed in the lung, and his dying wish essentially is for Taylor Russell to feed on him. So it ends actually with her eating him as he screams, and then the movie ends. So that's pretty much what happens. When it comes to like themes, another thing I do want to say is that it's kind of like carried, almost narrated by Taylor Russell's dad, who leaves behind a tape basically recounting like all of their experiences over the years. So we learn a lot about her past from that tape, and she plays it throughout this journey, little pieces of it. And that part was really interesting. I did like that as kind of like a framework for exposition. I thought it was a clever, interesting way to do it. I think all of what I'm saying here is that as a film, it works. Like the imagery was pretty good. There was definitely a lot of unsettling parts. We run into a lot of unsettling characters, and it's a world I was interested in. Definitely the lore of these cannibals and how they survive, and kind of what the rules are surrounding that, and what they can and can't do. And it was all very interesting. And I think the main reason I was disappointed was because I was going into it expecting like a gory, bloody romance, just like a love story is what I thought it was going to be. And even at AFI Fest when I saw it, the director came out and said a quote from the movie, but kind of twisted. The quote in the movie is something along the lines of there's no room for monsters in the world of love. And he turned it around before the movie and said that there is room for monsters in the world of love. So I just went into it thinking this is a love story. But the problem with that is the two main characters, Timothee Chalamet and Taylor Russell, have like zero romantic chemistry, like none at all from my perspective. There's not a whole lot of romantic dialogue. There is some physical affection, like they do kiss a few times. And then towards the end when they decide to be, normal people and they like have jobs and they seem happy and they like hug and kiss. And then it isn't until like that very end part that I did feel some like romantic chemistry when, she's crying because he's dying, but that's not necessarily romantic. I would cry over anyone I knew who was dying like that. So I was disappointed by that. But after seeing the movie and discussing it with other people, I kind of realized that it really wasn't meant to be a traditional love story. It's a love story there, but in the framework of like the overarching theme is kind of about addiction. I've come to see, and obviously there's like going to be so many different perspectives on this movie. This is the one that works for me, is that it's about addiction and like the drug scene in not necessarily just like the 70s era it's in, but even kind of today, and those relationships that form from addiction that are just like about sharing the addiction. There's no real love there. There's no real affection there. The whole relationship is about helping each other to the next fix, which in this case is finding a person to eat. And relationships like that aren't usually very deep, and so you might not have that chemistry. The only thing, or at least just the biggest thing you have in common, is that shared addiction. That made sense to me. That made me appreciate it more, and it made it seem purposeful that there was no romantic chemistry, because there wasn't really supposed to be. If it had ended when I wanted it to end, when they decided to be normal people, that's like a very fairy tale happy ending that isn't really realistic to what would actually happen in that situation. Because addiction, like when it comes to how we know it, like drugs, alcohol, things like that, there are relationships that stem from that. If you've ever seen an episode of Intervention, you know that like the boyfriend or the girlfriend to the addict is also an addict, and their whole relationship revolves around whatever it is they're addicted to, drugs or alcohol or what have you. And it's really hard to break out of together, and usually either only one will break out and leave the other behind because they don't want to, or they'll both try and then they find out that outside of their addiction the relationship just doesn't work. They just don't have that anything deeper for each other. It was all about, that fix. And there's at one point in the movie where Taylor just tried to get out of it. She leaves Timothee Chalamet behind. She tries to live her own life and move on. And then she just gets pulled right back into it with him. And then it ends tragically, which is also true to what like the real story would be, is, one half of the couple might go too far and overdose or get arrested or something like that. And then it usually doesn't end happily. If they decide to stay together and try to work through it, something happens. Definitely not in every case, but I feel like probably in a lot of cases. So looking at it through that lens of this isn't a gory love story. This isn't a love horror movie. This is a take on addiction. This is just an allegory. I liked it a lot more. Well, actually, I hesitate to say I liked it. I understood it and I appreciated it as a film. I thought as a movie with this concept, with this theme that I am assigning to it, it makes sense. And I think it's good. But I did not enjoy it. And maybe with these new expectations, if I watched it again, I would enjoy it. But I didn't have a good time watching it the first time. So I'm not really quick to want to watch it again. I'm sure I will eventually. But even with that understanding, and it's a nice movie to look at. It's the story, like I said, I appreciate now. There was other good elements in it, but I still would not say I liked it. And I don't think it's just because of my expectations going into it. I do think there are some not so great things about the movie in general. For example, I wasn't a huge fan of the acting. Taylor Russell, I thought she was good. She portrayed her character very well. She was believable as this kind of like awkward girl who has to move from town to town and just wants to make friends, but whenever she does, she kind of ruins it. And she had that good level of introversion awkwardness that I feel like a person in that situation would have. It's just like, I think Timothee Chalamet honestly wasn't that great. And I might be biased because I've never been a fan of Timothee Chalamet. I haven't seen his biggest hits. I have not seen Little Women. I have not seen Call Me By Your Name. The only movies I've seen with him in it are The French Dispatch, which I've seen most Wes Anderson movies. I have not liked a single one. So I don't know if it's not necessarily his fault. I'm just not a Wes Anderson person. Lady Bird, which was fine, but he was like a jerk in it, and that was like my first impression of him. So in my head, like he himself is like a jerk, even though I know that's not fair. I know. And I've seen Dune, which I thought was boring. I did not like it at all. I will have to see Dune 2 just because Austin Butler's in it, but I'm going to dread seeing Timothée Chalamet on screen for most of the runtime. I just don't like him. I don't know what it is. I just don't like him. So anytime his like face was on screen during Bones and All, I was like, ugh, like I did not like looking at him. It made me angry. Not angry, I'm being dramatic, but when you don't like an actor, it does really affect the film. So that's probably a big part of which is why I didn't like it. Also, on his acting, there's some line deliveries that are just like not convincing. I don't think he really had the emotional range that this movie required, whereas I feel like Taylor Russell did. She was very believable emotionally. Her actions were a little bit more believable for me, given the world, given the circumstance. And Timothée Chalamet, there's this one line, it's in the trailer, so I'll play it here if I can, where they're in a car and he says,
"We gotta do this. We have to do it.
We have to do it." And that line delivery is just terrible, I thought. I did not like it at all. It seems so like stunted and robotic. We have to do it. I believe that's a scene where they're like talking about how they're going to eat someone else and Taylor is like, I don't want to do this anymore. And he's basically saying like, it's in our nature. Like we have to. That's what he says. We have to do it. We have to. And I don't know why they would use that in the trailer. I thought it was like the worst line delivery of the film, but he's kind of like that throughout the whole thing. He doesn't have much of an emotional range at all. He's really hard to read as a character. And that could have been on purpose, but even if it was, like, why? Why would you make like one of your main protagonists, the main love interest, like hard to read? Because that's why I did not buy the relationship. I did not buy the affection between them. She seemed like she liked him a lot more than he liked her. And again, it could be purposeful because it wasn't really a real romantic relationship. It was just, through the bonding of being cannibals. And maybe she did genuinely like him and find him attractive, but he didn't feel the same way for her. He just liked having a partner in this, which makes sense, but not so enjoyable watching it on screen. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. I just really wanted to get my thoughts out. I don't know if I have like a real conclusion or if anything I said really made a lot of sense. I suppose I recommend it just because I'm curious about what other people think about it. I've seen a lot of people really, really love it and a lot of people like hate it and be offended by it. But then I read their takes and I'm like, well, you hate it because you had a really bad take. I feel like my take on it makes the movie better for me, but I still didn't like it. I do think that there can be a good movie that I don't like. Obviously, right? And Bones and All, I think, is one of those films. So, I recommend watching it if you haven't. If you have watched it, please tell me what you thought, and if anything I said made sense at all, please validate me. Or, if you felt completely different, tell me why, and maybe I'll appreciate the movie even more reading your perspective. So, comment about that. Let me know. In conclusion, I thought it was a well-made film. I wasn't bored watching it, which is a really big plus. Not as much, if you're going into it thinking it's like this gory, scary cannibal movie, it's not. There's really not a whole lot of blood and gore in it. There's a few bits here and there. It's used sparingly, which also isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just I was going into it expecting a lot more. So, going into it, expecting something a little bit more low-key, definitely more of like a drama than it really is a thriller. It's a little equal parts both, but definitely more drama than anything. Then I think you might have a better time watching it than I did going into it with that viewpoint. I liked that it didn't have a happy ending, even though I also hate movies that don't have a happy ending. So again, just very divisive for me. But that's just my personal thoughts, obviously. So yeah, let me know what you think. That's all I want to say. And like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time. Bye. Thanks for watching, honeybees. Make sure to like and subscribe. Bye. Meow.